Alright guys, welcome back to Learnlyte. In the last video we talked about while loops. So in this video we're going to talk about another feature in Python that allows us to perform repetition. And that feature is for loops. So what are for loops? For loops basically allow us to perform an action in Python for a predefined number of times. So what do I mean by that? Let's say we directly want to perform an action 10 times. If that's the case, it's best to use a for loop versus a while loop, because with a for loop we can specify how many times we want the action to be repeated, while a while loop will repeat the action as long as the condition holds true. So if we want an action to be done, let's say 10 times and only 10 times, it's best to use a for loop. So let's take a look at an example of a for loop. So we begin by just simply writing a function. So let's call our function for loop. So for underscore loop. And it takes an argument x. And then now to begin the for loop, we simply use the keyword for, followed by a variable. It can be any variable we want. I usually call mine I. And then we write in range, right? And inside brackets, we put x, or in here, it's going to be how many times we want the for loop to execute. So in this case, our for loop is going to execute x number of times, and x is whatever value we pass it to be. So what does the for loop, what action does the for loop need to perform x number of times? We want to simply print hello. So we want to print hello x number of times. So we go ahead, save, and let's hit run. Alright, let's call the for loop for underscore loop, and let's pass a value of 10. So go ahead, hit enter, and you can see that this for loop executes 10 times. And we can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Alright, so you can start to see the power of the for loops. Now, one thing you should note about the for loop is that once we pass in the range, which is right here, or how many times we want the for loop to execute, the for loop always begins by counting from 0. So in this case, we pass 10. And because we want it to loop 10 times, the for loop begins by counting from 0 up to 9. Alright, and let's see that in action. Instead of printing hello, I'm just going to have it print I. Right, and you're going to see what happens now. When I hit run module, I'm going to call the for loop again. And this time, I'm going to pass a value of 10. And we see here, the for loop counts from 0 up to 9. And that's pretty much how the for loop works. So whatever value you pass into the for loop, it counts from 0 up to 1 minus that value. So if you pass 5, it counts from 0 up to 4. If you pass 100, it counts from 0 up to 99. Let's try that again so you have a proof of concept. So let's call the for loop again. We want it to loop 20 times. So the for loop is going to count from 0 to 19 and not 20. 0 to 19 is actually 20 repetitions. We'll go ahead, hit enter, and we see we count from 0 to 19. So always bear that in mind. Okay. Another thing that you should note is that the for loop also accepts more than one parameter. So in this case, we have the range here which accepts x, but we can also specify other arguments, such as the beginning. Where do we want it to start from? So let's say we have in the range 2, x. What that means is that for this for loop, we want to begin at the value 2 and we want to end at this value, or 1 minus this value. Okay, so let's take a look at that in action. I'm gonna go ahead, save this, hit run, and I'll call for loop. And then this time, I'm gonna pass the value 10 to it, and let's see the difference. Here you can see instead of starting at 0, we started at 2 and we counted up to the value x minus 1, and we know that x in this case is 10 and 10 minus 1 is 9. So I hope you guys notice that. So when two arguments are passed into the range, the first argument is usually the starting value, and the second argument usually tells the for loop when or where to stop. And the for loop always stops at 1 minus that value. So in this case, 1 minus x, which is 9. Let's take a look at another example. We're gonna say for underscore loop. This time we're gonna go up to 15, but our starting value is 2, so it's gonna count from 2 up to 14. All right, and we can change this to, let's say, 8. Go ahead, hit save and run. So now it's gonna start from 8. So since it's starting from 8, our ending value, I'm gonna say 15. And here it starts from 8 and goes up to 1 minus, or x minus 1, and x minus 1 is 14, because x in this case is 15. Alright, and the last thing that I want to talk about before ending it is that the for loop accepts up to 3 parameters. And now the last parameter now, right, I'm gonna have 2 right here, comma x. So let's say 2 comma 2 comma 2x. So 2 comma 2 comma x. Alright, so what this saying? This saying is that the starting value should be 2. Hold on. My bad, let me correct this. Okay, there we go. Alright, so when there are 3 arguments passed into the range, the first argument is the starting value. The second argument basically tells the for loop where to stop. And the last argument tells it how much to count up by. So in this case, it's counting up by 2 instead of 1. So let's run that and find out what happened. We go ahead, hit save. In this case, we're going to call the for loop again. We're going to pass a value of 10, and we're going to see the difference. Now you can see it starts at the value 2 as right here. It goes up to the value x minus 1, which is 9 in this case, but it counts up by 2 instead of 1. So we go 2, 4, 6, 8. And since the ending value, since it counts up to x minus 1, which is 9, it won't include 9 because we're only counting up by 2. Alright, let's say we're counting up by 3, and our starting value is 1. So let's go ahead and run. Let's see what we get when we do that. And we pass the value of 10 to it. And we can see we get 1, 4, 7. So our starting value is 1. We're going up to x minus 1. And we're counting up by 3 each time. So we start at 1. Then we add 3, which is 4. Then we add 3 again, which is 7. And this time, let's say the starting value is 0. And you're going to see the difference. We hit run module, save, call the for loop function again, pass the value of 10, and see we count from 0, 3, 6, 9. So I hope you've understand for loops and the power of for loops, because this is very powerful in Python. It allows us to perform repetition for a predefined number of times. So key things to note when using the for loop: we begin with the keyword for, followed by a variable name, which can be anything, and then we say in range. Now inside this range value is where we specify how many times we want the for loop to execute or perform the action for. So let's begin. Inside the brackets, if we have only one parameter such as 5, then we're basically telling the for loop that we want to execute the action 5 times. And we know how the for loop works behind the scenes is that it counts from 0 up to 1 minus that value that we wanted to repeat. So in this case, we want it to repeat 5 times, so it counts up from 0 to 4. If we want it to repeat 10 times, it counts up from 0 to 9. And 15, it counts up from 0 to 14. Okay, so that's the first parameter. So when there are two parameters, in this case we have 2 and 10, the first parameter tells the for loop what value to begin at, and then the second parameter tells the for loop what value to end at, and it always ends at 1 minus that value. Remember, that's how the for loop works behind the scenes. So when there's two parameters, it starts at the first value and it ends at the 1 minus the second value. When there are 3 parameters, you're telling the for loop basically to start at this value right here, to start at 2, to end at 1 minus this value, and the number of times, and we're counting up by this value. So we're starting at the value 2, we're ending at the value 10 minus 1, and we're counting up by 3. So from 2 we go 5, 8, I believe. And if we run this, we should get 5, 8. Let me see. We're not using the actual value of x, so it shouldn't matter. And we get 2, 5, 8, right? Because it starts at 2, and we're counting up by 3, so the next number is 5. And then after that, the next number is 8. So hopefully you have a better understanding of for loop. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comment section below. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe for more content. And thank you so much for watching.